In this follow-up to the 3-act structure story, we'll have a look at the 3-act story structure being applied to some highly successful YouTube channels. The 3-act structure is a really simple way of being able to create good, strong stories. No matter what the media is that you're working with, it can be applied and you can get really strong stories out of it. People love stories, and it's reflected within the subscription base of YouTube, these YouTube channels, and support people who can tell great stories. So the 3-act story structure has been around for decades. For as long as anyone's been writing stories, they've tried to use a structure to tell them. YouTube's now a recent way of telling stories. So let's take a look at how the 3-act story structure can be applied to YouTube. So a quick refresher, what is the 3-act story structure? There are basically 3 parts to every story. We look at the beginning and what happens in the beginning, the setup for the story, the characters, and the world that you're in. In the second part, in the middle, we look at the adventure and what the adventure is they go on, and then at the end is a wrap and a close of the story. It's a very simple structure which can be applied very effectively to YouTube, and especially for content creators. If you're a content creator looking at boosting your story structure or boosting your views, you can't go wrong with using a classic structure to tell a story. For our case study, we're going to look at 3 different YouTubers. The first one we're going to look at is Jimmy Donaldson, better known as Mr. Beast. He currently has 34.1 million subs. The second case study we're going to look at is the Yes Theory. Thomas, Matt and Amar have amassed 5.33 million subs. And the last one I'm going to look at is Michael and Brian from The Proper People. They have amassed 1.3 million subs. So what are they doing right that makes people want to sign up and watch their videos? So let's have a look at what Act 1 usually is within a 3-act structure. It's the setup, it's the world that you're in, it's the rules of the world. It's also going to be containing the hook. It usually contains an inciting incident or a hook to get you interested in what the whole story is that you're going to watch, and it also contains a call to action. Inside the modern YouTube world, you do not have a lot of time to actually get this to happen. Majority of people will click on a video and they will watch for less than 10 seconds. So you've got a small window of opportunity to hook people in. Mr. Beast has been working on his YouTube channel since he was 12 years old, and he's formulated a great way of capturing people's attention as well as making great story content that people want to watch. Mr. Beast's Act 1 runs for about 30 seconds. He quickly establishes the idea of the whole video. It's usually wrapped around a challenge of some sort, and he'll introduce the people he's brought along to be collaborated with, and he'll run through the challenge and how the challenge is going to play out. It's usually wrapped up in a question, and it's edited together with quick, quirky editing, as well as words that kind of match up with what he's saying. It's the exciting incident at the end is always about, all right, now let's start the challenge. Yes Theory often have a longer introduction or a longer Act 1. They also provide, inside their Act 1, they provide what their challenge or their question was that got the video started. It's usually the title of their video as well. They introduce the people that are involved in it and how they came about. They usually provide perspective on where they came up with it and why they think this challenge is going to be well worthwhile. They always make the challenge personal to them. So it's a personal journey that we're traveling on with them as they travel through it. Always get an introduction to the key people that are on the journey. The Act 1 is always edited together with key points from the story throughout Act 2. So you get a quick overview of the whole story with only a narration over the top of it. Their average Act 1 runs for about 1 minute. Then they kick off into the adventure. The Yes Theory Act 1 is always posed around a question. They like to ask this question and pose it to the audience before they go in and actually talk about their personal perspective about why this question is important and what challenges they're going to encounter. The main channel mantra is to seek discomfort, so they're always pushing themselves to be able to do more than what they expect. Their average duration for their Act 1 is about 1 minute. The Proper People start their video around a location. They cut together iconic images from out their Act 2 and do a voiceover to introduce their target location, their historical importance of that location. They have a much slower editing style to give the images time to breathe and time for the audience to enjoy their filmic view of the way they do things. Their Act 1 runtime usually runs for about 50 seconds. Traditionally, Act 2 is about conflict and confrontation. In these YouTube stories, it's much more about the journey to the destination. If it's about the discovery or it's about how they've actually got to where they want to get to. It's more about the adventure, the challenge of the setup, and includes finding out a lot about the unknown. Mr. Beast's Act 2 is usually around 10 minutes of content. They explore how their challenges are affecting people and how hard it is for them to get through, overcome the challenges which they are facing. They're usually watching people. Mr. Beast's Act 2 is more about watching people and being a people watcher to go through their journey, their conflict, which they do have. They have a lot of conflict to get through their challenges because he's now puts up quite grand prizes. But Act 2 is more about exploring the journey for the characters to get through everything which they've been set. In Yes Theory, their Act 2 usually contains around 10 minutes of content as well. They are very much about exploring their world and what the conflict is that they have to get over. For them, it is very much about facing the conflict they have to do to get over to reach their end goal. There is so many things that they come across, whether it's watching, traveling, they have quite a fast editing style, and they're always talking from the perspective of the camera. It's very much about the character's journey. So we're going along with Thomas, Matt and Amar on their journey of self-discovery, and that is their point of view, and that's their strong point of Act 2. For the proper people, their main point of the content is not about them. They usually have about 20 minutes of content, but the main focus for them is about the environment they're in. So it's very much more about exploring the environment, what's gone on, where things were, what they would have been like in that point in time when their historical locations would have been going, and what's happened to that location within its time. With the proper people, their Act 2 is more about the exploration of the environment. They spend a lot more time setting up their camera angles and letting them do time-lapse drifts or just framing things really beautifully. They're very much cinematographers on an exploration, and they enjoy their exploration of architecture. Act 3 is traditionally the resolution. The story comes to a climax, and we close off all the developmental arcs of the characters and answers all the questions. Now this can be accelerated really quickly within YouTube. Mr. Beast's Act 3, and the winner of the challenge is, and we get to see the jubilation and excitement of someone who's won the challenge over the course of the video. His Act 3 is usually wrapped up in around 30 seconds. Yes Theory have a much more in-depth Act 3. They usually recap the challenge that they've gone on or the question which they started off on, and they cut back through editing some of the journey which they've gone through to relive some of the experiences. They're very insightful with a voiceover about what they learned through this challenge. And in their Act 3, they reflect on the challenge they've gone through and what its meaning could be for a learnt message throughout life. Their Act 3 usually wraps up in around 1.5 minutes. In proper people, their Act 3 is usually wrapped up in 1 minute. They review the journey and you get another look at some of the most iconic clips from the journey itself. They reflect on the location and its impact it's had on the world as a whole, but also then reflect on how their journey was to go through being there and the experience that they've had. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the 3-act structure for successful YouTube channels. Please comment below with any other YouTube channels you think utilize the 3-act story structure. Like and subscribe and check out more of my awesome content.